G'day, welcome back to the channel. I wanted to get out of indoors. I'm in the backyard at the moment. And the subject of this video is non-compliance. Non-compliance, it's what a lot of people are saying at the moment. The regulations have got so out of hand, so difficult, so expensive to comply with that non-compliance becomes some people's only option. So I'm going to investigate the pros and cons of non-compliance today, and we're going to see whether it is actually a good way to go. Well, I don't know what, let's find out. Okay, what I'm about to do is fly a whoop round my house. Here we go. I should point out that this is actually, I'm flying over my own property and I'm well away from an airport, but I'm actually braking. I'm non-compliant with some of the regulations around here because I am flying FPV without a spotter. Which is not a good thing apparently. And I'm also flying BVLOS because when I'm around this side of the house, even if I took my goggles off, I could not see the drone. I could not see it. So it's BVLOS. Oh my goodness. So I'm non-compliant. Now, is anyone in any danger here? Is this a dangerous thing to do? Well, I would say no, because I'm flying over my own property and I've checked my drone to make sure that, let's just fly past, a bit noisy. I've checked my drone to make sure the failsafe is set to disarm. So if anything goes wrong, radio link fails or anything else, it will fall to the ground. And because it's flying on my property, the only thing that could be damaged is my own property. So yeah, it is non-compliant, but I would argue that it is 100% safe. 100% safe for everybody, because also the type of craft, this is a whoop. It is a whoop. It has enclosed fans, enclosed props. It's very light. Even if it did fall on you, there's no risk. So I'm being non-compliant, but that doesn't mean I'm being unsafe. There's a huge difference. Now, non-compliance doesn't give you a license to go out there and be dangerous. Most certainly not. In fact, quite the opposite. If you are being non-compliant, you've got an extra responsibility to stay safe. You can't fall back and say, but I was following the rules. That defense will not cover you if you damage someone's property or hurt somebody. That's not going to work. So when we fly, excuse me, I can't think and fly at the same time. When we fly drones or anything that in a non-compliant fashion, we are effectively taking full responsibility for safety, as we should do anyway. So one has to work into that non-compliance does not mean non-safety. So there we go. So here I am. Now, I've done this before. This is not the first time that I have flown my little quad around the house. In fact, I do it quite often because after a long day, and I mean a long day, I started at 3 o'clock this morning. After a long day, I like to have a little bit of relaxation, and this is one way to do it. I can just cruise around. I'm not doing flippy flops. I'm an old man. I don't do that crap. But what it means is that I can enjoy my hobby safely, but if I followed the rules, I couldn't be doing this. I'm breaking 2 really important rules according to the regulator. So I've done it before. In fact, I challenged the local regulator here, excuse me, while fly past. Can we get through this gap? I doubt it. This could be the end of the flight because I'm not really good at gaps. I told you. Here we go. I'm terrible. So, as I said, I've done this before. In fact, I'll link to a video in the card somewhere there, link to a video in which I did this just to prove a point. And I challenged the local regulator to, to deal with me, to prosecute me, because I wanted to make the point that flying outside the rules doesn't always mean flying unsafely. So, but the question that we're asking, of course, is should you fly? Just a minute, I'll go and get the drone. Well, that's tangled up in the motor, isn't it? Got grass in the motor. Haven't had that before. Never mind. It's all good. Unplug it. Turn stuff off.
Telemetry lost.
So where were we? I've recovered my drone. I hit the fence. Did it break the drone? No. Did it break the fence? No. The fence is actually broken because we had some terrible cyclone come through a little while ago, blew most of the fence over. I've spent a lot of time actually putting it back up, but we can't buy plywood to repair it, so I've made makeshift replies, which is why I was trying to fly through a gap that shouldn't exist. Anyway, getting back to the subject in hand. So I did a video in which I deliberately broke the rules. I was non-compliant to make the point you could be safe and non-compliant, and the regulator investigated and found nothing to prosecute me for. In fact, their official decision was insufficient evidence, which I don't think was the truth, because I actually confessed in that video. I had cameras showing me flying with the FPV goggles on and from the point of view of the drone and around my house, and I confessed to breaking the rules, much as I've done in this, but they didn't take any action because it would be silly. It would be silly to prosecute something that wasn't unsafe, just as the flight I've just done there was not unsafe. So non-compliance is an option. It is an option, providing you remain safe. And also a couple of other caveats. You must also make sure that you don't come to the attention of authorities or other people. Now, a lot of people already, in fact, most FPV flyers already are non-compliant. It annoys me a little when I see some figureheads and groups saying, oh, you must follow our CBO rules, and that one of the rules is you must always have a visual observer, when we know that every FPVer regularly, if not regularly, then at least at some stage, has flown FPV without the mandatory visual observer. The interesting thing is I've seen no evidence of damage, injury, or death as a result. So that is one of the regulations that, with some common sense and some risk management, you can say, I'm not going to comply with, but I'm not going to increase the level of risk for anybody, just as I did today. So the non-compliance, it is the option that many people are already pursuing. Now, if you want to, when it comes to things like remote ID, then if you're flying miles away from the crowd, if you're flying in your own property, or you're in a position where you're not going to come to the attention of authorities or other people, you're not going to annoy the Karens, then non-compliance is a fine option as far as I can see. And now, I'm not going to say to anybody, you should not comply. That's a personal decision you have to make for yourself. I can't tell you not to comply. That would be unreasonable of me. All I can tell you is that I choose, on occasions when it is safe to do so, not to comply with every regulation, because it would be significantly restrictive of my own ability to fly. Now, I post videos usually every Sunday or Monday from flying at the airfield. The thing is, you don't see me flying very often because I'm busy filming people, so I don't get the chance to fly on the weekends. So sometimes I have no option but to fly alone. And that might mean just flying around the house. It might mean going somewhere where there are no people and there's nobody else's property and flying alone, FPV or line of sight. And I do those things safely. I've been doing this for over 50 years. Over 60 years I've been flying model aircraft, never hurt anybody, never damaged their property. And that was most of that was long before these rules came in. So the rules are they give you some good advice. There's some good advice in the rules, but as Harry Day says, some rules are for the guidance of wise men and the obedience of fools. And I'd say that the FPV Visual Observer rule is one of those. And again, talking about BV loss. Now, I am not a great fan of BV loss. You don't see me flying FPV models 30, 40 kilometers away. Personally, I don't think that the risk is worth it for me. Other people do it. And again, I've never seen anybody injured, anybody killed, or any property damage as a result of that kind of activity. But it is another rule that you're supposed to follow. Now, here I flew BV loss. I flew around the other side of the house. It was beyond my visual line of sight, even if I'd taken my goggles off. So it was a breach of that rule. But again, who was endangered by that? What could have gone wrong? When you're looking and you're going to fly outside of the rules, you've got to be very careful to look for what could go wrong and make sure you've got ways to mitigate or reduce the risk of things going wrong. As I said, this little drone, if I lose my RF link, it falls to the ground. And no matter where I was flying today, if it fell, nothing would have happened. No one would have got hurt. And the only property that was remotely in danger is my own property, which I'm prepared to take the risk for that. I should be allowed to endanger my property if I choose to. No one else's property was endangered. Nobody was at risk. So the fact that I flew beyond visual line of sight wasn't compromising safety. But as I say, on other occasions, I believe that for me, I don't think the risk is justified to fly BV loss. But again, these are all personal choices. These are decisions that you have to make as an individual. I'm probably a little risk averse compared to a lot of people. But even though I'm risk averse, I find myself flying outside the rules on many, many occasions. Yet, as I say, haven't killed anybody, haven't injured anybody, haven't damaged their property, because although I may not be compliant, I am safe. I'm probably safer than I would be if I just slavishly followed the rules. A good example of that is that I fly at an airfield, a full-size airfield where manned aircraft come and go on a regular basis. And when I started flying there was no requirement, you didn't even need a spotter. The rules didn't exist. Over time we introduced some rules ourselves. The first rule we introduced was that we would have an aircraft radio going all the time. That wasn't a legal requirement, it was just a safety measure that we looked at this and said, it's a great way to manage the risk of a manned aircraft appearing out of nowhere. So we bought an aircraft. Well, I bought an aircraft radio out of my own money. It was several $100s, but it was worth it for the safety. And then, of course, the regulator came in and said, oh, you must have an aircraft radio. Too late, we've already got one. We don't need your rule. We're smart enough to work things out for ourselves. And now we've got an ADS-B alarm because pilots don't always use their radios. In fact, although pretty soon you're going to have a remote ID transmitter on all your models over 250 grams in the USA, manned aircraft still don't need a radio if they're operating in Class G airspace. It's not a requirement. So let's work that out. So we decided that because there'd been a few instances where pilots had come straight in without using the radio, and only because we had visual observers did we avoid a bit of a risky situation, I built the ADS-B alarm. And now, although it's not a legal requirement, we have an ADS-B alarm because we are thinking not from how can we comply with the rules, but how can we be safe? How can we not have to rely on rules to be safe? That's what we do. That's just called risk management. So if you're doing the same thing, if you're going to identify the risks and manage them in an intelligent way that ensures that you're going to be as safe, if not safer than slavishly following rules, go for it. I see no problem with it. Now, the regulators may disagree. They may disagree because they don't do what we're doing. If you went into the FAA or CASA or CAA and asked for a hands up of everybody who flies FPV on the weekends, I don't think you'd see a single hand. Not regularly anyway. Maybe some of them have tried it and maybe they've got a Mini 3 or something that they fly occasionally when they go on holiday, but I don't see a lot of hobbyists in the halls of regulators. They're just not there. So they make up rules on the basis that, and this really annoys me, this makes me so cross. If you were to look at the rules and the regulators' attitude in many cases, you would think that they believe we are all bad actors. We are just chomping at the bit to get out there and endanger people, endanger property, endanger aircraft, bring mayhem on the world. So we must be solidly regulated so that we don't do that, which is just so slanderous, so libelous. Because I think we've seen, go look at Canada. Canada is a great example. In Canada, there is virtually no prescriptive regulation for drones that are less than 250 grams in weight. All you've got to do is don't endanger people, don't endanger property. Those were my two rules before Canada came up with them. And also don't fly in areas where flying is prohibited. So that's it. Apart from that, you can pretty much do what you like. Now, have we seen a wave of disasters and incidents and damage and injury and death as a result of sub 250 gram flyers having this amount of freedom? Not having all these prescriptive regulations to tell them exactly what they can and can't do? No, we haven't. I've seen very few incidents coming out of Canada. And I don't think I've seen a single one involving sub 250 craft. Which means that, generally speaking, left to their own devices, the vast majority of people who fly drones and model aircraft are incredibly responsible and incredibly safety focused. Yeah, there's one or two, like the guy that flew the drone near the Hawker Harrier in the UK and got fined £3,000. There's always one, but you can't regulate everybody and deny everybody the freedoms on the basis of one person who only has one oar in the water. That's unfair and unreasonable. If that was the case, we wouldn't be driving cars on the roads, because we see on a regular basis people do things that kill other people when they're out driving. We don't say, oh, this is too dangerous, no one's allowed to drive anymore. No, we have a reasonable set of regulations, a reasonable set of rules that people sometimes follow. And let's face it, non-compliance is just a part of life when you drive a car. Most people, who hasn't had a speeding ticket? Who has not had a speeding ticket? I'm pretty sure everybody has. It's an act of non-compliance. So why should people be so worried that, ooh, you can't be non-compliant with the drone regulations? Well, I think we've sort of proven that you can, as long as you remain safe. And a word to regulators, CAA in New Zealand, the organisation that has investigated me on many occasions and ultimately found no case to answer or insufficient evidence, or it wasn't in the public interest to prosecute me. CAA's new director, their new head, made a very interesting statement when he came in to his position. He said that they were going to focus on safety issues, not on technical infringements of the regulations. And that is just a brilliant perspective. That means they're going to focus, put their attention, they've got limited resources, they're going to focus, bloody neighbours and their chainsaws, they're going to focus on exactly where they can make a difference. They're not just going to go out there and pick the low-hanging fruit, someone that's done something technically infringing like me today. Technically I've infringed the rules, I've flown beyond visual line of sight, flown without a spotter, but I have done so in a way that is not unsafe. So in that respect, they shouldn't be picking on me, they should be chasing up the people who are really causing a safety issue. I'm going to have to go inside because I hate living in suburbia. It's terrible. I used to live in the country, I loved it so much. Anyway, chainsaw. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I'm going to go inside and finish this video.